Great. Well, welcome to our regular Sunday sit. It's every Sunday, 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. Always on Zoom, except on the third Sunday of the month, which is going to be the 16th this month. It's on Zoom and in person as well. That's our hybrid meeting. Um, Tuesdays, we have our 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Meditation as Refuge. That's on Zoom only. Joe Kai will be leading this next one. Wednesday, we have our Just Sit. That's a silent peer-led meditation group on Zoom, 5:30 p.m. to 6:15. And Fridays, we have our loving kindness meditation on Zoom, 4:30 p.m. to 5:15. Ian will also be leading that one as well as today's session. I wanted to mention a couple of other events as well. We're doing we're calling this group Meditation is for Everyone. It's a beginning meditation course for brand new beginners or for pro beginners. Everybody could use a refresher. It's going to be every first Sunday of the month. Ian, I believe you just did the last one yesterday. And then the next one's going to be on November 5th with Joe Kai. We are also looking for registration for our Awakening Our Hearts, Exploring White Privilege to Build Authentic Relationships Across Difference. That's going to be a day-long retreat on Saturday, October 15th, 10 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. with Arena Wiseman and Mary Stankovich. That is going to be at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert in Rancho Mirage. There are some other COVID protocols and fragrance-free protocols. I would advise looking at the website and looking at the newsletter. And if you have any questions, send us an email. And we're also supporting a residential retreat with Leslie Booker, Arena Wiseman, and Ian Challis at Damadina Meditation Center in Joshua Tree. That is a residential retreat for the LGBTQI identified community. We're specifically requesting spaces for Black, Indigenous, people of color identified individuals who would like to join for this retreat. I didn't want to say that it's a 2-week retreat. I'm actually going to be there just for 1 week. So if 2 weeks is too much for your work schedule, 1 week is just fine too. You can do the first week or the second week. I'll be there at the second week. With that, I'll leave you to Ian.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you all. We're a very small group today. So Therese, welcome. Vanessa, David in the next room. Jason, Elise, Michelle, Ruel, France, Brandy. So lovely to see you again. It's been a while. And Danny, welcome. And Sharon and Lisa and Greg. Thank you for being here with us today and creating sangha, creating community, being together with the intention to practice the Buddha Dharma, to practice the teachings of the Buddha and what he offered for our freedom, for our liberation, for our ease in the world, for greater ease in the world, and not just for ourselves, but for each other as well. So our typical Sunday starts with about a half-hour meditation, and then we'll go into a Dharma talk. And we're going to be looking at the Eightfold Path, which is sort of maybe the central teaching of the Buddha, at least one of the most essential teachings of the Buddha, and completely essential to our movement toward freedom. So we'll be exploring that over today and over the next 8 weeks, step by step, each place on the path. So it's something that, so I'm glad you're here for the first day and hope you can come back next week and continue the study. So what I'd like to do now is just invite us into a period of meditation, and this may be taking a few moments to settle in. It sort of feels like we've just come into this space, and I don't mean to rush us into the meditation, but it can be a beautiful way of really coming into this space fully and granting ourselves some time for practice. And so I'll offer a few instructions or invitations or thoughts before we move into silence, and if that's helpful for you, you're welcome to it. And if it got your own practice that you know, and yeah, I know what I'm doing, just feel free to tune my words out. It'll just be 3 or 4 minutes. And so I'd just like to invite you to find a comfortable posture for yourself. And I like to mention that we privilege or center the idea of sitting posture as sort of being the meditation posture. But lying down posture is just fine, or standing, or reclining. Just finding a posture that is caring of your body in this moment. And seeing if you can bring a sense of alertness and also ease into your body in this moment. And I'd like to invite us to get in touch with the breath for a few moments, if that's comfortable with you. Maybe taking some deep, full breaths, maybe a little deeper and fuller than normal. Really filling the lungs and releasing on the exhale. And maybe on the next few exhales, letting go of anything it's easy to let go of. Maybe there's some tension or holding in the forehead or jaw or shoulders, or the chest or belly. Just allowing the body to soften, release. And as you rest with the breathing, adding the sensation of body, where is the body being held by the chair or the floor or the cushion. Feeling your body supported by the earth, by gravity. As I do this, I like to reflect that earth is asking me to be here. The whole body is made of the elements of this earth. So feeling into that sense of belonging or inviting that possibility. And then as we move into our silent period, just offering a couple of invitations for practice. So you may like to stay with the sensations of breath moving through the body, or the breath experienced at a particular place in the body, the rise and fall of the chest or belly, the passage of air at the nostrils. So you can rest with the breath and allow that to be an anchor and return when attention inevitably wanders. Or you can open awareness a little bit larger and just notice what's predominant in this moment. Might be a thought or a body sensation or an emotion. Seeing if you can be aware of what's coming up right now in experience. Knowing it, resting with it and allowing it to change on its own, allowing one sensation to fade away, a new sensation to arise, and just staying with whatever is present. You might ask yourself, what am I aware of in this moment? It's the sensation of knee on the floor or hand touching hand. Maybe it's a thought of planning. Maybe it's a sound in the next room. And knowing that, and knowing that sensation changes. Just resting with awareness. So either focusing on the breath or resting with a sort of open awareness, or whatever practice you like. So I'll ring the bell in a moment to signal the start of our quiet period, and then 3 times at the end. And as we begin, I'll offer this quote from Kobun Chino Ataga, Zen priest. The contents of this moment are the contents of awakening. And just checking in and noticing where attention is now, where awareness is, and seeing if you can reconnect with that if it seems a little far right now, or just staying with it just as it is in this moment. What am I aware of? And again, checking in, noticing where the attention is, and inviting it back if it's wandered, perhaps feeling into the body, feeling into the sense of the earth holding you again, or reconnecting to the breath, seeing where awareness is in this moment. in the last minute or so of our practice period, just reflecting how this has been for you and appreciating your efforts, your showing up, your coming back to the practice again and again, and recognizing that each practice period doesn't really exist on its own. It's part of a continuum of practice, and appreciating that intention of coming back again and again. Thank you for your practice, and if you just joined us during that period, thank you for being part of our community today, and welcome. And just so interesting, isn't it? You know, this like seeing the cycles again and again. So today was the first day I set up my inside light for Zoom because I know, and like by the time we're coming to a close, it will already be sundown here in Palm Springs, and just kind of feeling that and feeling into these rhythms and cycles. And um, yeah, so again, glad you're here, and we're kind of embarking on another beautiful exploration, and I want to welcome you to this exploration and hopefully excite some interest in the subject of the Eightfold Path. So this is the Buddha's technology, or you could call it a framework of freedom. And I want to give an overview today, sort of a wide look. And then over the next 8 weeks, we'll be exploring each of the components of the path one by one. And Chokai will be here, and Mary will be here, and I know Tenshin Roshi will be here, and our roster of folks through the next 2 months. And this is such a core teaching. I think we do teach on it probably every year, but it is absolutely at the heart of what the Buddha taught. This is really the essential framework of our practice. So wise view, wise intention, wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, wise effort, wise mindfulness, and wise concentration. And I'm going to say that list a few times through my talk today. And I want to point out that I'm using the word wise. And sometimes you may hear me say right or noble, or I might offer a quote where someone's using that term. And so if I say right or you hear it, please hear in that a sense of appropriateness. So appropriate to the process of liberation, not a value judgment in any way. And if I say noble, please hear that in the sense of spiritually noble. So I want to take a moment to notice how the idea of a list may land for us, how it might land for you. So sometimes all the lists in Buddhism can seem a little daunting and academic maybe. And so I really want to invite you to rest easily into them. And little by little, they seep in. Or you can actually spend some time memorizing them. And the Eightfold Path is a very good place to start, just memorizing these places on the path. So, what the Buddha is offering here are really like 8 strands in a very strong cable that's capable of lifting us out of greed, aversion, and delusion. So we're developing these together, intertwining, wrapping around each other, creating something really sure and strong through our practice that we can actually depend on. So yeah, if you want to memorize something in Buddhist Dharma, the Eightfold Path is a framework that's worth memorizing. I was thinking about this. We memorized like Roy G. Biv in high school chemistry, probably for the colors of the spectrum, or we maybe memorize the stages of grief, or if we wanted to learn the treble clef, every good boy deserves fudge. Um, these kind of things, because these frameworks are important in the sense that they can help us remember what's important. And the frameworks that the Buddha developed 2,600 years ago are relevant now and really help us keep our intentions for practice present. And they invite us in to remember and explore the strands of freedom. So that's my pitch for memorizing the Eightfold Path. um, and I also want to say, it just kind of happens naturally too, by osmosis. That's the other way. So I just came back from assisting at a retreat at Spirit Rock. This is an annual retreat for queer identified folks, and this was in person with 96 practitioners and 4 teachers, and it was over 5 days. And on the last day, as kind of a surprise to me, the lead teacher decided or felt that we needed to offer the framework of the Eightfold Path because there were so many people in the group who were entirely new to the teaching. Something like 45 of the people there had never sat a retreat before. And so I got to take part in an impromptu panel talk on the Eightfold Path with less than an hour to prepare. And if you know me at all, you know I like to prepare. I am not exactly Mr. Spontaneous, so this talk was way outside my comfort zone, or so it felt at first. But as we took our seats for the talk and people came into the hall, I just knew, okay, this is going to be okay because I can rest into these teachings. I can trust the Dharma and I can be supported by this framework of the path. Even in presenting the material, we can be supported by it. I can think, okay, what is my intention here right now? How do I use my speech in wise ways? How do I tap into the wisdom that I've been exposed to and taught and learned for myself? So when we commit to Dharma, we are never outside of the path. The path is always with us. And that's one of the things I want to stress, that, practice gets woven into our life. The path can become part of our life and we can bring it to all the situations that we experience. And it's because it's not static. There's that framework, those 8 terms, but beyond that, those are just pointing at, like a fractal expressing itself endlessly in relation to whatever's coming up, to our lives in this moment, to our conditioning, and how we bring it into practice. So then why? Why this particular framework? Why this technology? So what need does it respond to? I've talked about that a little bit, but what need does it respond to? Why did the Buddha offer this? And why was it such a central part of the teaching? So investigating that brings us to another framework, which is maybe even more well known than the Eightfold Path. And it's in this framework that the path is embedded, where we find the path. And so I'm talking about the Four Noble Truths. So remember, noble meaning spiritually noble. So the Buddha said several times in different ways, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. And the way I hear that is, I identify what suffering is, and I identify a path to end suffering. The Buddha was very practical, not theological, not esoteric, not mystical, practical. And so he was really clear on what he was offering, the scope of his teachings. In one of the suttas, the suttas are the recorded teachings of the Buddha from 2,600 years ago, he said that just as any other animal's footprint would fit inside the footprint of an elephant, so would everything that he taught fit into the framework of the Four Noble Truths. So let's rest there for a moment. Let's talk about the Four Noble or ennobling truths. So the first is, gets gets stated all kinds of ways. Life is suffering. That's all it is. That's not what the Buddha said. But there is a recognition of the human condition, that there is dukkha, which gets translated as pain, stress, suffering, unsatisfactoriness. This whole thing of how it ain't easy being in a skin suit and living in this world as vulnerable as we are. And so here's the Buddha saying, okay, here's what dukkha is. Now, what, friends, is the noble truth of dukkha? And this is what he says. Birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, death is dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair are dukkha. Not getting what we want is dukkha. In short, the five clinging aggregates are stressful. And the five clinging aggregates is another teaching, but it's basically the places where we look for a self. And then the second truth, that the origin of suffering, where is suffering coming from? How does it arise? So dukkha is conditioned by tanha, or thirst, clinging, craving, clinging to our desires, clinging to our aversions, so that pulling, grasping, or pushing away, clinging to our places of delusion where we check out, or where we are ignorant, or where we are ignorant willfully, because it's easier that way or safer that way. And then the Buddha says, what is the noble truth of the origin of suffering? It's the craving that leads to future rebirth, mixed up with relishing and greed, looking for enjoyment in various different realms. Nothing wrong with experiencing enjoyment, but it's the looking for it, the trying to get it, the must have. Feeding that cycle again and again of like, more is needed than what's here. And he says that is craving for sensual pleasures, craving to continue existence, and craving to end existence. This is called the noble truth of the origin of suffering. And then the third noble truth is cessation, or the end of suffering. And the Buddha says, what is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering? It's the fading away and cessation of that very same craving with nothing left over. So he's talking about complete liberation. There's nothing left over. There's no more craving. Giving it away, letting it go, releasing it and not adhering to it. This is called the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. So here the Buddha is saying there is a way to free ourselves from suffering, from dukkha, from pain. A means to move in the direction of liberation. And that means That technology is, little drum roll, the fourth noble truth, and the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path that we're talking about today. So here's the Buddha. And what is the noble truth of the practice? Of the practice, so something to be done here that leads to the cessation of suffering. It is simply this noble eightfold path, that is, right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So that brings us to where we are today, looking at the Eightfold Path. But before we go there, I just want to take a moment with this formulation. Why these four steps? Why four truths? Stated in that particular way. And it can be really helpful to know that. It's been helpful for me to know that um, that probably this was a formulation that was very common in the Buddha's time, and Buddhist scholars point out that this was a formulation that doctors in the ancient Indian subcontinent used in diagnosis and treatment. And it was basically, what's the ailment? In this case, dukkha, suffering. What's the cause of the ailment? Okay, the Buddha found a cause: craving, clinging, aversion. Is it possible to recover? So, is there a recovery from this particular ailment? Yes, the Buddha says yes. And what's the means of the recovery? Ah, the Eightfold Path. So, when we look at it through this lens, the Eightfold Path is like the path of treatment. And it's a self administered treatment. They're talking about the medicine for what ails us. So, not to get hung up on the list, but we're going to explore the list. But we use that list kind of like a choreography or a songbook or a palette. It's creative, it's alive, it helps us in our movement toward freedom, it supports us. It's the means of transportation, the means for facing fear, of dancing with the changing conditions of life, of actually surrendering, letting go of what we cannot truly hang on to. So it's the prescription, the Buddha's medicine for the pains of life, for the sorrows that, every one of us as a human being or even a sentient being faces. It's the recipe. So this is, whatever metaphor works for you, but I think that medicinal model is really helpful. So I want to at least name the 8 areas of practice, the 8 places on the path, areas of exploration, of creativity, of growth, and knowing that we'll look into each one of them over the next 2 months. So let's start with wise or right view. So this is the insight or the wisdom that comes from our own practice, and that we're always developing and refining as we move through and experience the different steps of the path. It's actually also the foundation of the path, because we need some wisdom to see through delusion and distraction and to move in the direction of freedom. We need some wisdom to think, hey, yeah, I see something here. I'm willing to try this out because, yeah, I see the suffering and I think I see what might be causing it. And yeah, I have some wisdom, some understanding that says, yeah, why don't I try this out? And then it's also the fruit of developing all the other path factors. So even though this isn't a linear path, you can look at wise view as, in some ways, as both the starting place and the ending place, or sort of a overlapping spiral. And then wise intention or wise thought. So these are our intentions of non-harming or compassion, non-hatred, or stated positively, love, and renunciation, the letting go, the willingness, the intention of letting go what we get tangled in. So wise view and intention are called the wisdom factors of the path. The first two are called panya or wisdom. So then we move into the next three factors, and these are the sila, meaning morality or ethical factors of the path. And they're all about our integrity, how we relate to the world, how we act in line with wise view and intention. Remember the non-harming, the compassion, the letting go. And the Buddha specifically named wise speech, wise action, and wise livelihood. So wise speech is relating to others and to ourselves with speech that's true, that's kind, that's connecting, that's useful. Timely sometimes comes into this, but you get the idea. True, kind, connecting, useful. And noticing speech that doesn't fulfill that. And when we see it, when I see it, knowing, okay, that's not wise speech in this moment. So I don't have to believe it or embellish it or continue it. And when I hear it, I can also know this isn't wise speech. This isn't informed by kindness, compassion, care, letting go. And so I can let go of this too, or I might be able to let go of it. And then we come to wise action. And this is about how we relate to others, humans, animals, the living system of the earth, in ways that are non-harming and supportive, giving the gift of no fear wherever we may be in the world, however we may be in relation. So specifically, it's refraining from causing sentient beings harm. It's refraining from taking what isn't given. And it's using our sexuality wisely and in ways that don't harm ourselves or others. So you're kind of getting the sense here. It's a lot about non-harming. It's a lot about letting go. And when we come to wise livelihood, and this is all about how do I make my living in ways that don't harm myself or other beings? And I want to say, because I know this can be a charged area for a lot of us, sometimes we just need to harm as little as possible. But can I hold that intention to harm as little as possible and to expand that non-harming so that I'm not harming myself or other beings? And so how we engage in our livelihood naturally includes everything that just came before: the wise speech, the non-harming, the non-stealing. And this part of the path, this sila part, the ethics, speech, action, livelihood, this is actually considered foundational to our movement toward freedom. In practice, because in practicing these factors of the path, we ease our own heart. And in that easing, we create the space for other factors to blossom. There's even one beautiful sutta that emphasizes how important our ethics are by saying, if we practice wise speech, action, and livelihood, that's really all that's necessary, because everything else is going to flow from that all the way to full enlightenment. So how we behave in the world is foundational to not only the path, but to our practice. And so then we come to the three concentration factors. wise effort, wise mindfulness, and wise samadhi or concentration. So effort, whenever we do the Eightfold Path and divvy them up, I always get effort, which I think is kind of like trying to tell me something. But this is about encouraging our own supportive, helpful thinking and mental states and letting go of what doesn't support with discernment and with wisdom that comes from experience. So there's that wisdom factor. Noticing the unhelpful thoughts and not getting angry with them or impatient or fed up or whatever, but just not clinging to them, not believing them, not embellishing them, and instead choosing to incline the mind and heart toward thoughts that are supportive and that do lead to freedom. And a beautiful way of doing that is just remembering the path factors. Where is intention in this moment? How can I practice wise speech in this moment? What is wisdom telling me in this moment? And then we come to mindfulness, the most famous path factor, which is really the skill of directing and sustaining attention, this training that we do, because all of the path factors are something that we do. They invite action. So we're bringing our kind, open presence to whatever is in our experience so that we can know it. So we might train on the cushion, as we did, or in the seat or the bed or whatever, with breath or sound or body sensation to strengthen that capacity to keep the faculty alive and present with us so that we can apply it to whatever is happening, even when we're not on the cushion or not in a meditation period. So this is the faculty that keeps us awake and coming back to life. I just always think of it as the opposite of being asleep, because this is where we find our choice. And then the final path factor, but again, thinking of them as working together as strands in a cord. This is concentration. So this is gathering, deepening those energies of attention and mindfulness. So it's a deepening awareness, a sustaining of mindfulness. And as that happens, when we experience joy, happiness, contentment, and particularly equanimity, which is this important factor that allows us to hold whatever is here with as much clarity and wisdom as possible, stillness in the mind. In that open, aware stillness, that's where we see deeply into the nature of experience. And that clear seeing, that's the seeing that brings wisdom, in which wisdom can arise. And then that in turn increases our store of that first factor, right view or wisdom. So these build on each other, they support each other. So again, not a step-by-step path at all. It's not like I'm just going to practice right speech, and then when I've got that down perfectly, I'm going to move on to right action. We're practicing all of these together. And practice in one part of the path will strengthen and deepen the others. So this is a direction that the Buddha and other teachers for thousands of years have offered because it leads to freedom, and we can experience that. So a little bit more about the path, just a couple of reflections. One that always comes up for me, and it's a number of years ago, quite a few years ago, when I started sort of practicing seriously. I met a dear Dharma friend whose name is Linda Blanchard, and she teaches Buddhism in Texas. And as we started our friendship, this kind of Dharma friendship, I remember her saying, "We will stumble down this path together." And I've always remembered that, and I reflect on those words and the pointing toward two things. That yes, we're going to stumble on this path for sure. And that there is a path. There is a path supporting us, guiding us. There is a path. There is a path from clinging to letting go. There is a path from greed to generosity. There is a path from aversion to open-heartedness and equanimity, from hatred to love, from ignorance to wisdom, from anxiety and fear to a peaceful heart. There is a path, and that path belongs to each one of us. So this is the nutshell of the Eightfold Path, the noble or ennobling path. Wise view, wise intention, wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, wise effort, wise mindfulness, wise concentration. So another reflection that also likewise I think about very often, and it inspires me. So a few years ago, we were on Zoom, but already it was a few years ago, and Hugh O'Neill, who is Beth Mulligan's partner, and some of you know Beth as our past guiding teacher. So Hugh needed to fill in for Beth because she was called to be with a friend, a sick friend. And there was one thing in particular that really resonated for me deeply in the talk that Hugh gave. And it's when he said, and I'm paraphrasing, and this was in the midst of COVID and all the uncertainty around that, and terrible things like unfolding in our culture. And Hugh said, when I don't know what to do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. When I don't know what to do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. And I've thought of that so many times since, as I navigate my conditioning, my own habits of mind, my places of stuckness, my places of obsession, the habits of the dominant culture that, we all swim in. And when I notice myself experiencing despair or anger or, anxiety that's manifesting in compulsion to be informed every day, every moment of the day, or that's leading me to just check out, that beautiful invitation is there. Come back to the path. When I don't know what I can do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. I can come back to this practice, to communities like this, like ours right now, today. Come back to the practices that nourish and support, and that wisdom can see that's true because I keep practicing with it, and it does get better. Come back to what you love. When I don't know what I can do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. So there's a sort of mindfulness of the path here. And so sometimes it might be helpful to just write down the path factors and look at them before you meditate or start your day or commit them to memory. Remembering that whatever is here, that I have a choice in how I relate to that. That the world keeps unfolding, it keeps changing, it keeps challenging me, and that this is its nature. And that I'm not stuck in that world, in the sense that I'm also changing, I'm also unfolding, I'm also growing and responding and relating in new and better ways. And by better, I mean more effective, supportive, peaceful ways. None of us is a fixed entity. If that's anything that we know from the world of physics and from the Buddhist teaching, there are no fixed entities. We are changing constantly. And this is really good news. And in fact, it's the source of liberation because it means that I'm not stuck. I'm not a limited, finite being that the world is happening to. So I'm in relationship with the world, my experiences, actively responding, creatively responding, hopefully, moving with what's here, using the wisdom and practices of the path to smooth my way through, to relate in more effective ways. And yeah, I stumble a lot. Once in a while I soar, but I'm not fixed. I'm fluid, I'm creative, responsive. We all are. And this gets to choice. Do you ever wake up in the morning and consider what your choices are for that day? Of course, choice is a function of privilege, circumstance, and often conditions that we have no control over. Yet we do have a lot of choice. Oh, today I can practice the Eightfold Path. Whatever's required of me, whatever my commitments are, oh, today I can choose to relate with interest and curiosity to what is coming into my life instead of just letting it happen to me, instead of running after fleeting pleasures or fighting what I don't like or numbing myself when I'm confused. Oh, so this very life, these very circumstances, I can practice the Eightfold Path here. In fact, that's what they were designed for. So the contents of this moment are the contents of awakening. I offered that phrase, that beautiful Zen koan, you could say, before we went into the sit. The contents of this moment are the contents of awakening. And there is a path to awakening. Because we're not talking about the contents of the moment over there when the weather is perfect and my body has no aches and pains and my relationships are all peaceful and everyone I love is doing well. It's not that moment when I've got it all together, that time when no one acts crazy anymore and the world doesn't act crazy anymore. But right now, in the midst of all of the craziness and the uncertainty and the strangeness, the contents of this moment right now, I can meet them with the Eightfold Path. So this is our choice. This is our place of choice and creativity. I can relate to what's arising in this moment, externally and internally, from the path. Wise view, intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. No one is stopping me. The Buddha said, Ehipassiko, come and see. Come and see for yourself. Try it. See. And that's what we'll be exploring for the next 8 weeks, each path factor. So I want to close with a beautiful ancient poem. So some of you may know one of the books of the suttas, these teachings and collected teachings of the Buddha and his followers from 2,600 years ago. There's a book called the Theragatha, and they are beautiful poems, teachings, but in poem form of the nuns, the early nuns, the first nuns that the Buddha ordained. And it's a beautiful collection. And in fact, I was reading, it's one of, if not the earliest, collections of poetry by women. And there's actually a beautiful book called The First Free Women Poems of the Early Buddhist Nuns that you can check out. But I wanted to offer this one because I felt like it was very appropriate to what we've just been talking about. And it's called Mita, Friend. And so I believe this is one of the nuns either telling her own story or reflecting the story of a fellow nun. Mita, friend, full of trust you left home and soon learned to walk the path, making yourself a friend to everyone and making everyone a friend. When the whole world is your friend, fear will find no place to call home. And when you make the mind your friend, you'll know what trust really means. Listen, I have followed this path of friendship to its end, and I can say with absolute certainty it will lead you home. So let's just take a couple of minutes to let some of the words and feelings and thoughts that have arisen just be felt and known. Words so often seem like they're the language of the mind, but they also land in the body as well. This is another way that Dharma is offered. So, just want to open the floor for any thoughts. That's a lot of information. I know it is. And that's why we're going to spend 8 weeks unpacking it. And so, anything come up for you that you'd like to inquire about or share your own understanding about? We're a bit over time, but let's just spend a moment dedicating the merit of our practice, which just means sharing whatever good has arisen in our practice together, because we've all come together with our attention and our good intentions and our willingness to connect and practice together. And that is huge, because we're really bringing something into the world that needs to be here. That sense of listening and being open and being willing to practice with what's here with as much skill and kindness as we can bring. So may our efforts ripple out from here to touch all those around us and all those that we know and all those that we don't know. And may they have peace in their lives. And may they awaken from all of the causes of suffering. And may they know great freedom and great joy. So thank you again so much. And yeah, this has been really rich and meaningful. Jokai will be talking on Tuesday. And then I'm not sure who's here next week, but I think it's Mary. So come back for right view or wise view or noble view, and see you soon in the practice fields.